Week 6 of Aon's Public Affairs podcast was recorded May 13th, 2020.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Week 6 Public Affairs podcast. Daniel Sirota, based out of Chicago, Public Affairs Group for Aon. I am so excited to be joined by my good friend from Washington, D.C., Executive Director of Government Affairs, Robert Hoffman from Accenture. Robert, welcome to the podcast.
It is a great honor and a privilege to be joining you today.
Well, thanks. And Robert, so much is happening right now in Washington, and I wanted to dig in this week. We saw a bill get proposed by the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the HEROES Act. A lot of things have happened. Can you dig in and give us kind of the scenario of what's going on?
Sure. Well, obviously, the HEROES Act is a follow-on to the CARES Act, or Phase 3 of relief measures, stimulus measures that have been proposed and enacted to deal with obviously the coronavirus, COVID-19, and the economic effects that we are seeing all across the country. The HEROES Act is a logical follow-on to that, and based upon what we now see as what will be a much more extended effort to try to mitigate the spread of the virus while at the same time reopen the economy and get people back to work in a way that advances public health. And obviously, the HEROES Act is essentially the beginning of a discussion. The House Democrats have laid out what they see as their priorities. The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, I think in an attempt to demonstrate the seriousness of her caucus, is going to try to move things forward and get it to a vote. But obviously, this is a process, a chess game, pick your metaphor, and in the hopes that people will come to the table and they'll arrive at some bipartisan consensus, which has been the norm, which has been great.
Yeah, and $3 trillion was the dollars of the HEROES Act, bigger than what we saw at CARES. What specifically would you say that people on the podcast that have listened, lately have been some of our big multinational, small business, mid-sized business, and kind of risk managers? What do you think is important for folks to know that's kind of in this bill?
Well, it's a great question. I think, the CARES Act, just to juxtapose it, it's based on the reality of what they knew at the time and what they felt the impacts were going to be. And I think then the CARES Act was really more about, okay, let's make sure that the resources are there to, essentially bend the curve. But at the same time, let's hit the pause button on the economy. So that way, we can bend the curve. And so the pandemic unemployment insurance compensation program, the Paycheck Protection Program, the various facilities that have been given to the Federal Reserve to make loans and to help distressed industries, as another example, was all about, okay, let's make sure that we are doing what we can to keep people home and keep people safe, but at the same time, mitigate the economic effects of that. So now what we are seeing with the HEROES Act is, okay, a lot more is going to have to be done. States, for example, who are on the front lines, as dealing with the pandemic, are seeing extraordinary impacts with respect to lost tax revenue, increased demands on resources, hence $700+ billion for state and local governments to address not just COVID, but the fact that states are in, budget deficit territory. And as you know, states are legally required to balance their budgets. The federal government is not legally required. The federal government has enormous amounts of fiscal wiggle room that the states don't have. So the states are looking for essentially what amounts to fiscal relief. The Paycheck Protection Program was based upon the assumption that the economy would be moving forward sooner rather than later. We know now that it's not going to be sooner rather than later. So we need to address that reality. Same is true with the unemployment insurance compensation. And so I think that, what is the focus here is what are the measures that are going to be needed to take to address more the reality that, yes, we are going to start seeing a gradual reopening of the country, but we also have a commitment to, protecting public health. So how do we manage both of those while at the same time help the states and the localities that are dealing with this pandemic on a daily, hourly, second basis, that they have the resources they need to, again, advance both of those goals of economic rejuvenation and public health protection.
And what do you think is going to be the timing? So, they're going through the process. The Rules Committee is meeting tomorrow, Thursday. Could have a vote Friday, just depending on everything else and, concerns from, the Democratic caucus on, if there's things that are total red flags. But I would assume Friday would be vote day. What do we think timing overall for Heroes or a next stimulus could be?
Well, I think for sure. I mean, you laid out perfectly, the schedule. I mean, the speaker wants to vote on Friday. If for whatever reason, again, one of the important requirements of being an elected official in leadership in Congress is you got to learn to count. And in the House, you got to learn to count to 218. So if she's got 218 votes, she's voting. So that's what we can expect. We can expect that. It could either be Friday or it could be early next week. So the House will make its move. The bill goes over to the Senate, and we can expect, I think, at that point, the negotiations to begin in some degree of earnest. We're also approaching a holiday period with respect to the Memorial Day week. I think that will be a marker of sorts. I frankly will expect that we're going to see progress in June. I would expect and put a marker for an agreement, sometime in the June timeframe. And I think a lot of things will be brought to bear as to why June is important. The timing of the Paycheck Protection Program comes into play here, not just in terms of funding, but in terms of, the loan forgiveness process. Similarly, we're getting close to the end of the Pandemic Unemployment Insurance Compensation Program. That needs to be, further extended. And then again, I think the overriding concern is the fiscal health of the states and the localities that are just doing great work to help address the effects of the virus and the economic consequences that have resulted. I think all of those will be brought to bear on the need to come together, hopefully in June.
I couldn't have said it better. I would agree.
Oh, you could have said it better. Come on now.
Maybe. No, but overall, I do think that is a, Memorial Day weekend and everything else with the timing aspect. I definitely think that is, the right timing that you've laid out. I want to shift now, right? You and I have partnered on a workforce initiative that we took in as part of our business strategies called Apprenticeship. We had a big push in Chicago through the Chicago Apprentice Network, partnering with multiple employers, really focused on, changing the way we're looking at workforce. We are seeing unemployment numbers rise. The latest I saw was 14%, was the latest unemployment numbers that came out about a week ago. Is apprenticeship still a viable pathway for folks moving forward? What is your view on the apprenticeship model now, even during the COVID crisis?
Yeah, well, first, I have to say, partnering with you, the John Lennon of apprenticeship programs, because you're such a great spokesperson, not just for the Chicago Apprenticeship Network. I mean, you have been, a great national voice on apprenticeships writ large. And I think, frankly, we're inspired by the fact that we have bosses that totally get it and have been the leaders of a national movement, in Greg Case and my boss, the CEO of Accenture, Julie Sweet. And that's, I think, been a big reason why we've had such, great reception to apprenticeships as a model to address, essentially the challenges of a skills mismatch in our economy. It's interesting. We're starting to unpack the unemployment numbers, and no question that the impact of COVID has been felt, mostly in lesser skilled positions, in obviously retail and tourism, and in some cases even manufacturing. And what we're also seeing is companies who have taken the time to look at how technology and digital innovation can transform their approach to business management, have found themselves relatively more resilient in responding to COVID. And, those are the companies that can easily institute work from home policies, as one example, and they had the infrastructure ready to roll. And so that just puts a premium from where we sit on the types of positions that our apprenticeship program is meant to address. And so from our point of view, apprenticeships remain critical because, again, we think that there is still a skills mismatch in this economy. Alternative pathways are needed, I think, more than ever, because I think a lot of people are going to take a step back and do the kind of personal assessment that our apprentices made in making the decision to pursue an apprenticeship program in tandem with going to one of the Chicago city colleges. I think a lot more people are going to find themselves in this situation. There is still clearly a need. So the need for not just a pipeline in Chicago, but pipelines all across the country are going to be even more important.
Yeah, and I think it's consistency in roles too. It's now more than ever, I think HR leaders and employers can now really take a look at their jobs and really say, where can an apprenticeship fit? where can I partner with the local community colleges to create opportunities for individuals that are looking for work and really create a business strategy that's long term, that makes it where it's kind of the new normal, right? It's kind of that new way of hiring for the future, the future of what our economy may turn to. And I think what we've done in Chicago has now become that next landing page. And I think the leadership from Accenture has been tremendous. Shout out to Mike Chiappetta. I mean, the work on that end has been, great. And I think it's a model that folks can learn from. So my next question, Robert, to you is, how can employers get engaged? How can they find out more information about apprenticeship and how to be able to, look to it?
Well, obviously, I think there are a number of avenues, certainly, and kudos to you and Michael Chiappetta. Michael is the Paul McCartney of apprenticeships. I'm just Ringo. And you've demonstrated why you are the John Lennon of apprenticeships. What you just said is, right on point. I think first and foremost, I would encourage employers, particularly those in the Chicago area, to, essentially to reach out to you and to others that are involved in the network. I think one of the great things that you've done as part of the network is have, regularly cadenced programs to bring people together to learn from employers, to learn from the community college representatives, and to learn from apprentices themselves. So I think, obviously, first and foremost, making sure that we're continuing to provide that outlet to employers. I also encourage employers to look at the playbook that we joined together to produce as part of the Business Roundtable's Workforce Partnership Initiative. Just to folks who are listening, just Google Apprenticeship Playbook Business Roundtable, and you'll get a great link to a great work product that really, again, driven by Greg's and Julie's leadership. I mean, it started out as I think it was like a 5 or 6 page summary that turned into a very thoughtful roadmap that, to your point, really helps not just CEOs, but CHROs understand what's involved here in terms of, what it takes to do apprenticeships. And then obviously, I think, looking at ways to partner with the local colleges, where you operate, and seeing where there are opportunities. And chances are they have given thought to these types of pathways as well. And, frankly, one of the things and one of the advantages of working with companies like Aon and Accenture is we can help those companies think about how to stand up networks very similar to what you have done such a tremendous job doing in Chicago.
Yeah, and I would also, encourage you hit it. Reach out to the local community colleges. Figure out a partnership. Really look inside your coffers and see what jobs may fit these types of roles. Aon and Accenture, HR, IT, from Aon's perspective, insurance, there's other opportunities to be flexible, but community colleges is a great resource for talent and a great way to be able to change your workforce. So, Robert, I want to say thank you for joining the podcast today. Really appreciate you coming on, being a continued leader in Washington and a great friend and a colleague that I can go to as somebody that is, interesting times we live in by working from home and talking to legislators and also our clients, and always appreciate your support.
Well, again, it's a great pleasure to be here, and I'm honored to be a part of your band, Mr. Lennon. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for joining. Next week, we'll be joined by Violetta, the CEO of our health business in Latin America, to really talk about how Latin America is responding to the COVID crisis around health. Thanks for joining, and we'll talk to you soon.
This information is a resource for Aon clients and business partners. It is intended to provide general guidance on potential exposures, and it is not intended to provide medical advice or address medical concerns or specific circumstances. Due to the dynamic nature of infectious diseases, Aon cannot be held liable for the guidance provided. We encourage visitors to seek additional safety and medical information from credible sources. Thank you.